Right. I thought I would lighten the afternoon because I know this is prime snooze time, right after lunch and toward the end of the session. So I'm going to present a view of innovation with language technology from sort of three perspectives. One I've called Bigfoot, the second I've called giant squid, and the third little fishes. So that's how we're going to look at this question of innovation in the LangTech space. These three descriptions are kind of general way to talk about what are, not really anything all that unusual in describing the evolution of software markets, but they are a kind of maybe slightly colorful way to try to apply these general principles to language technology. So the Bigfoot strategy is what I think of as the disruption model, which attempts to short-circuit the market in some way. The giant squid strategy is a kind of colonization. It's probably the most common experience that people have in the evolution of software markets. And then the third is the little fishes in the ecosystem, which is the real question for the people in this room today, I expect, which is how do the little fishes join in the movement toward the giant squid model or get completely sliced out by the Bigfoot model. So first of all, talk a little bit about the Bigfoot strategy. Some of you might recognize Monty Python's foot there. In this scenario, someone comes into the market with technology which is so unique or is perceived to be so unique that it actually completely disrupts the existing applications or requirements in the market. Usually it means doing what Jochen referred to as creating a category or a new software category. Frequently it's simply reinventing an old one but calling it a new one. It usually involves some kind of control of access to the users of the technology, not always entirely within the rules of the competitive environment, but usually companies have to stay at least marginally within them in order to carry on doing what they've been doing. Over time, a company who achieves this kind of position in a software market has to retain some kind of technological superiority, or again, either the perception of superiority or at least performance of the technology that is adequate to the markets that it serves. And finally, anybody operating with this kind of model has to be really lucky on timing, because usually there are so many contextual requirements and drivers for innovation in software markets that unless you get a lot of, unless you're lucky or a very good judge of trends in technology markets, you can be too early in terms of platform, too late in terms of adoption and those sorts of things. So if you wanted to think about the kinds of companies that might be considered Bigfoot companies in general, the obvious example in the mainstream software market would be Microsoft, who invented the PC operating system category. I mean, it didn't really, but we all think it did, and then it got sued everywhere in the world for dominating it too heavily. It created that category. It controlled access to desktop technology through its ownership of the operating system. It retained its technological superiority for many years, considered to be, the sort of standard for Office-type applications for many years until quite recently. And it got very lucky with its timing because it converged with the emergence of the PC and all those kinds of things. The other obvious example is Google, and this situation reminds me of a presentation I gave in a long time ago in the early days of the e-commerce revolution, when I gave a presentation at a conference at which every single person who gave a presentation used the example of Amazon.com as the company to talk about. Well, it seems that Jochen and I are on the same wavelength, because he and I both thought of Google Translate and autonomy as typical examples of companies that have created a category and achieved significant market share through these kinds of positions in the market that I'm discussing here. Now, in terms of Google Translate, clearly everybody in this room knows that they didn't invent a unique technology because the technological approach they used has been around for a long time. They didn't create a category. Many of us used Babelfish for years to translate web pages and that sort of thing. But they made everyone think they had invented a technology and created a category because they had control to users. That is, they had, through the delivery of the machine translation via one of the most commonly used interfaces in the world, they made what they were doing seem unique, so that people would say, people that you would meet would say, oh, Google has invented machine translation. Naive people who don't know anything about the technology would have the impression that they created this, when in fact they did not. Now, whether they will retain their technological superiority is a question that you guys can answer, I can't, and how their technological performance compares to other people who might be kind of slightly Bigfoot in the space for machine translation, such as, say, Microsoft, again, is a technical question, one that's very interesting, I think. But if you think about autonomy as another example of a Bigfoot Strategy language technology company, it's very different and equally interesting, I think. As Jochen was saying, it's a company that markets itself as meaning-based solutions, starting out as a pure search company, a pure spin-off algorithmic-based search, which gradually accrued around it new companies and capabilities that created what was perceived to be an entirely new kind of search engine and content handling environment for the enterprise. Now, of course, autonomy isn't the only company that does this kind of thing in the world, but it is perceived to have been an innovator by using the kinds of tools that are not that uncommon in other types of applications that employ natural language and language technology type things. So, in other words, if you can achieve these things, if you have a technology, say a truly disruptive, paradigm shifting, as I think somebody called it earlier, kind of innovation, it is possible that somebody in this room could do the kinds of things that create Bigfoot strategies, but it's very uncommon. So more likely is what I call the giant squid strategy. This is where you colonize the market through acquisitions, basically, and this will be very familiar to most of you who know anything about commercial software development. You do this strategy for a number of reasons. First of all, to sort of pull together the technological components that you need to have a significant presence in the market. So you acquire technology, you fill in technological gaps as they relate to the business you're developing. You address new platforms. You frequently develop services, although sometimes especially in the language technology space, on the translation side, sometimes the services come first and the technology comes later. There's an interesting example of how that's going the other way around in speech that I'll talk about in a minute. And the idea of this giant squid success strategy is that it involves continual refreshing and innovation of the offering, and in the case of language technology, of both the technological components and of the applications in which the technological components are delivered. I would say that the giant squid is the sort of norm in enterprise software markets, as I think I mentioned before. Now, I'm going to go through, this also seems to be this day for slides with lots and lots of logos on them, so I'm going to punch a button here in a minute, and there are going to be a bunch of logos that are going to come up. But this is basically a story about innovation deriving from two well-known research institutions, well known to all of you, I'm sure, Xerox PARC and Stanford Research, SRI, both of whom operate in the same neighborhood, same part of the world, doing similar kinds of things. They're not identical. This is a story it shows a remarkable kind of interlacing of all the sort of fingers of research and development in the speech and associated language spaces over a long period of time, but involving the gradual accumulation of many, many technical innovations into one single giant squid speech company, which I'm sure you all know the name of, but I won't mention yet. So when I push the button, what you're going to see are the logos of the companies in order, chronologically, as they were formed or acquired in the creation of this giant squid, starting in 1980. So it starts with Ray Kurzweil. Some of you, even the young ones of you probably know about Ray Kurzweil. It really all started in his bedroom as a high school student, where he invented a pattern matching concept as a way to compose music, and he ended up on television. He was very famous in the 1960s as a teenager. He was on a television program called I've Got a Secret, and his secret was that he could compose music with a computer, and they had the computer on the television program. It was all very exotic. This is when he was 17. He then eventually formed a company after he did his degree at MIT, etc. It was sold to Xerox. It became Scansoft. Xerox, of course, was doing early research in language technology at Parg. Each of these companies fed into the flow of the development of this company's Scansoft until in 2005, it was merged with a company that was a spin-off from SRI, which is the other of the language technology-related research outfits in California. And that was Nuance, of course. Now, as you can see from this, the track record of acquisition mania did not come from the Nuance side. It came from the Scansoft side. And there are probably people in this room who know quite a lot about that left-hand stream of technology, because many of those technologies were European technologies that came into L&H, which were subsequently acquired by Scansoft after the bankruptcy of L&H. So anyway, this is the picture of how, from Ray Kurzweil's bedroom in Brooklyn, or the Bronx, wherever he lived, in 1980, the technology he developed for pattern recognition, which was originally applied to optical character recognition, an OCR application, evolved into a speech company, which by 2005 is called Nuance, even though it was largely the Scansoft acquired companies that comprised it. Then between 2005 and 2011, this year, having acquired about 25 companies in the 25 previous years, the company subsequently has acquired about another 25 companies in about 5 years. So it's a highly acquiring sort of outfit, Nuance. But the interesting thing about this evolution of the logos is that the logos on the previous page were largely technology companies. They were putting together individual components of speech that could be configured to create solutions of various sorts. In the early days, principally in the healthcare and to some extent telephony-based kinds of speech recognition or text-to-speech type applications. On this page, you increasingly see the acquisition of things that are further into the value stream in the market. And particularly the emergence of attention to new platforms, particularly, obviously, mobile. So Nuance acquires a Finnish company that has a sort of localizable mobile interface through which they can deliver complex services, for instance, because they didn't have the capability to do that inside. It acquires several health-related medical dictation type products to build on its historical strength in that area. It acquires Dictaphone, which some of you may know had already been acquired once by L&H back before 2005, but then they got unacquired, and then they got reacquired by Nuance a bit later. Dictaphone, by the way, was founded by, apparently, I looked this up, by Alexander Graham Bell, who, of course, founded the labs that became Bell Labs, and where Ray Kurzweil's uncle worked. So this is a very long story of a very long tradition of research in American research and development labs. The final acquisitions in this scenario from Nuance are the ones here. These are this month only. 2 companies have been acquired, not with language technology, but as service companies that include language technologies. So this is the example I was mentioning where you get sort of the reverse of the translation industry. This is a speech technology company that's acquiring human-based medical transcription services in India. So a bit like Lionbridge 8 or 10 years ago took its technology services to India to complement its European and American-based translation services. This is now a European and American-based technology company that's taking its transcription human-based services to India where they can source the combination of human and technology services for what is a very large market. So if you want to know what a language technology innovation engine looks like, this is it. This is a global company. These are the components of a company that's putting together capabilities in all the most significant application areas, particularly healthcare, telephony, mobile, and to some extent warehousing and industrial types of applications. It's global. It's pretty multilingual. I don't know how multilingual. That's something worth finding out, but certainly purports to be fairly multilingual. So the question is, if you were one of the little fishes in the stream of language technology innovation, what kind of strategy is appropriate when the market is full of either big feet or giant squids? And I think the only obvious advice one can give is that every innovator and new entrant into language technology transfer types of things needs to find a place in this ecosystem. So, first and foremost, obviously, what is the selling proposition for the technology that you have? What does it do, and why do you think it does it better than other things? How can you demonstrate that it does it better than things that already exist, even if that's only that it handles a language that isn't covered by existing products? What are the engineering type challenges to taking it from the lab into the marketplace? What is the appropriate, or what is an appropriate or plausible technological kind of hosting environment for the kind of technology you're talking about? So this is really quite a key issue. Whether it's internet-focused or packaged software or hosted software or telecoms, embedded, whether it's service-based or can be integrated with service, all those kinds of things are really important questions when you look at the likelihood of the success of transferring an innovation of some sort into a real, actual, live market-type application that people will buy. Oh, it's time's up. So the trick is to understand these paths to market or to have partners who know something about them to get into the right locales. And although you're not likely to be either Bigfoot, you could grow into a giant squid like Nuance did. I did have one more slide. I'll just quickly go over this. This is, that one on the left isn't, that's an iPod, that black thing. This is a Siri application. I thought we could kind of go full circle with this, which is an outcome from the DARPA Kahlo project, which was you probably all know this, recently launched, acquired out of SRI by Apple for putting on the iPod, which is described as having rich functionality specific to the context or task, and it does speaking and thinking. Well, the speaking is nothing new because it's the Nuance technology. The thinking is something new, and it comes from SRI. But the really interesting thing about Siri is that because it's a context-based agent, it only works in the context in which it was developed, in the language in which it was developed. In other words, it will only work in, probably at this point, California. So in terms of opportunities for little fishes, any kind of software-based service or solution with language technology built into it is likely to have some of these characteristics of contextuality and language locality that make opportunity. And I think we've seen some examples of that in our earlier presentations. We have a session tomorrow for business people, by the way, if you feel like coming. Thank you.